Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that here in New Jersey, you are on lands historically populated by the Lenape people. The Northern Highlands were originally and continue to be home to the Muncie-speaking Ramapo Lenape people. The Southern Highlands were originally home to the Unami-speaking Lenape people. We acknowledge and are grateful for the very close relationships that Indigenous peoples had and have with the natural world, and their long commitment to uphold these relations. With this understanding, we are committed in New Jersey to working as partners toward a shared future with deep respect and equity. And with that, we're here to talk about enhanced climate resiliency through regional planning. So we have three excellent speakers, or at least two excellent speakers in Brittany. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to establish a corridor for climate resiliency. Doug has a great presentation that he's going to give us to educate us on what that means. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how TNC, the Nature Conservancy, has climate resilient science, and they get into some examples of how we use that to plan for our open space planning. And then Barbara Davis is going to get into some of her examples of how she has used this in her planning. And I really should have started with introductions. So with us, we have Barbara Davis. Barbara is the Vice President of Programs at the Land Conservancy of New Jersey. She leads the Exceptional Planning Program at the Land Conservancy. And by working with towns to protect land and build climate resilience, Barbara has led Land Conservancy in preserving over 200 properties in underserved communities. Next, we have Doug Vornlocker. Doug is the Land Projects Manager at Ridge and Valley Conservancy. And though Doug just started with Ridge and Valley last year, he has had he's been a passionate environmental professional for over 20 years. And he's already been a phenomenal partner. And I think he's going to be just a fantastic partner in land protection with Nature Conservancy. I'm Tricia Aspinwall. I'm the Land Conservation Manager for the Nature Conservancy. I lead our land protection work and also our work with the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint, which you heard a little bit about during the plenary. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug to get us started with our work presentation.
Thank you for that great introduction. If you didn't get it, Tricia's the third grade speaker. Okay, so I've listened in on some of the panel discussion, which I thought was great, and I just want to stick to the momentum of that panel discussion. Keyword connectivity. It's gonna be a theme through my presentation, but I also introduced another word that I want you to think about, and that's uncertainty. So I think everybody's warmed up, so I don't really feel bad about asking a question as we get started. And that question is, what is resilience? It's a word that we're using more frequently in the program area here. And I know you're not completely warmed up yet, so I'll give you a few different answers. My favorite is the answer on top, and that is preserving options. In times of uncertainty, specifically we're talking about our changing climate, we need to maintain and preserve as many options as we can. As an ecologist, as a restoration practitioner, as a land manager, I want to make sure that we keep as much around and healthy as we can because of that uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. How hard are these storms going to be? They're awfully hard lately. And how much damage or ecological disturbance they're going to cause. This is a Nature Conservancy definition, which is great. And I'll let you chew on that a little bit, but just some characteristics which could be used as another definition. What are resilient lands? What are resilient ecosystems? They're biodiverse. We have another word that's being used more frequently lately, microclimatic diversity. They're connected, that connection. And also ecological redundancy, which is having multiple species in the same role or function within an ecosystem. So if you lose something in all your ash trees, there's something else that is still functioning in that role. So it's not a catastrophic loss. I was going to spend a minute talking about the impact of climate change on ecosystems, but I'm not going to spend more than 10 seconds. So I'll just say New York City yesterday and today, right? So this is some great research that was done. I love the visual, but I think everyone in this room understands climate change impacts. So what I'm here to talk about are tools, and the tool that I'm going to spend the most time on are corridors, and specifically in the later in the presentation, climate corridors. But we've been talking about corridors for a long time in land conservation. And I seem to think, after doing some research for a couple of different presentations, that what concretized the word corridor was the introduction of this piece of legislation, which didn't make it all the way through, but maybe some good things came out of it. We were focused in this legislation on the development of national level corridors, which I'm not quite sure if that's realistic or not, but it also emphasized habitat restoration, which was important and continues to be important. Tying into the discussion of the panel this morning, we have a lot of land. Now it's time to start thinking about the long term and figuring out some ways to steward those properties and take care of it, in some cases, to destroy those properties. After the introduction, when I did the research here, then we saw all these different terms with the word corridor attached develop. And as an ecologist, this happens frequently. We had 10 different words to talk about the same thing, and that's my head blowing up. But we need to do a better job there. But I think introducing corridor into the terminology and having an understanding what it is an important concept for what we're doing here. Just some basics. All of these different terms, there's some basic fundamental concepts that are attached to them. And one of them is the definition of what a corridor is. And we're connecting wildlife populations. That's that connectivity that's important. And I added this slide because we all have seen these great crossings, artificial, person-made. They're not considered to be corridors. They're crossings. So here's no connectivity. Here's corridor connectivity, and then connectivity via crossing. Different types of corridors, continuous or unbroken, usually long strips of land. In land conservation, we're acquiring properties. Part of our priority is to see if this is something that's going to address a gap or a critical gap. We may start with stepping stone corridors, which are good. In some cases, maybe that's the best we're going to do for 10, 50, or 100 years. But we can also, in our objectives, another key word for today, when we set our objectives, when we're reviewing properties of interest, when we're taking a look at options, we can maybe address some of these critical gaps through the connection of adjoining properties, which is a great thing to do. Scale size. So when I did the research for the presentation, I thought this is going to be easy. Somebody developed a system. We're going to be able to talk about it. It's going to be standardized. I found something that works sometimes, but after doing a few presentations with the slide, waking up in the middle of the night thinking about things too much, I thought to myself, this is really something that comes down to your project's objectives or your organization or your agency's objectives. What are we looking to accomplish? And what I mean by that is we may have a piece of property that's just a couple of acres that normally we would say it's not worth the investment of time and energy. But if that's addressing a gap or a critical gap, that may be worth the time to do that. And I started to think about Google Maps and zooming in and out. And where I was going with that in my head was that this could be something that's happening in someone's backyard. And then I thought, on the other end, this is something that could be global, right? Migratory birds, certain insects like pollinators, right? They're traveling long distance, and we might not be able to develop a continuous corridor from where they're coming from to where they need to go to. But what we can do is take a look at stepping stones, right? Monarch way stations and things like that. They may be helpful. So scale and size, we need some context, but make sure you think about that when you're developing objectives. Now, in climate corridors, so where are they a little bit different? These are areas that are the best route between current climate types and where those climates will occur in the future, but also a little bit now. But remember, there's change happening, and there's uncertainty. And when we talk about climate corridors, the majority of the time we're talking about north and up. So we're thinking about species right now that need to move north and up. And the reason is why? I have to answer like one question. Temperature, right? Temperature. Precipitation comes into play a little bit too, but we want to look at property that is helping to move these, allowing a flow of species to move northwards, away from the equator and up in elevation. Those are good things. So is this happening? Are species actually starting to move up and north? And the answer is yes, but I've read a lot of research about this, and it's not as easy as saying yes all the time. This is happening. And the reason for that is because certain times there's obstacles for those species to move. It's not just land-based, it's also marine-based and riverine-based species as well. Some species have a large amount of flexibility that they can stick around in the areas that they're adapted to for a while, maybe indefinitely. And then other species have limited flexibility and they've started to move. And some of them even started to move west, which the experts that are doing research haven't been able to really pin down why. But the idea here is they're not happy, they're not comfortable where they're at. And with the changing climate and the uncertainty, these species have moved, and we need to make sure that they have the ability to move through the development of corridors. What's also something that's really interesting and concerning is even if they have the ability to move and we have everything right, there's a change in the timing of certain natural processes, excuse me, that they may be able to move and get to where they want to get to, but the resources that they need to thrive aren't there or aren't available yet. Remember, certain species is a very narrow window of time. So that's something that when we're thinking about conservation of certain species, we want to take that into consideration. And where does it need to go? It needs to go into the discussions about our objectives. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? So some great things about climate corridors. Remember the characteristics that I showed you in the first slide about resiliency, maintaining biodiversity. That's a good thing. Providing a path, unobstructed path. Just collecting more land, we're gonna have some additional carbon sequestration going on there, and microclimate populations. We're creating those through the development of climate corridors. From a species level, it gets them to resources. It gets them to on the bottom genetic diversity mates that now we're not isolating a population and there's inbreeding and there's a potential problem with that. And then we talked about migration, gives them the opportunity to move unobstructed. How about some maybe negative things, but things while we're planning and we're developing our objectives that we should consider? When we connect land, it gives invasive species the ability to move as well. With those species that are moving come the disease, and the disease is specific usually to that organism or that group of organisms, but how is that disease going to interact with our ecosystems when we move north or when we move away from the equator, move north or move up? Some other things, population synchrony. So you have population A, population B, some type of barrier. You remove the barrier, now we have population C. And how is C going to interact with A or B, or are we going to lose A and B because of that? And if these populations are important or threatened or rare, we need to take that into consideration, again, in our objective. And edge effects. I mentioned that these corridors are long and narrow, so there's a lot of edge. So think transition area from a forest to a meadow. Well, species behave differently in edge. So the more edge we have, the more different behavior we're introducing into a community that at the time may have been stable. So again, think about those things. They are important. In the Ridge and Valley, where I'm a part of that, we have a lot of great things to save. We have a lot of great things to conserve, to protect, not just for us, but also for everyone else that may be south of us or maybe below us in elevation. We have ridges and we have valleys. So what are some of those great things? Cold air pools. Our air up in the area of the Ridge and Valley is a little bit cooler. Groundwater is cooler. Our canopy is thicker. Our snow lasts a little bit longer because of the higher elevation. So these are all things that are really important for us to protect. And we incorporate those things into the corridors, and we talk about those characteristics when we're prioritizing properties. So here's a couple of our corridors that we're continuing to work on. You can see things warming up, the Paulsville corridor, a collection of properties. So that's a great thing. You see that there are some gaps. You might label this as kind of stepping stone. Again, depending on where you're at on Google Earth, zooming in and out. We use this for planning purposes. And we prioritize properties that it makes the most sense based on, again, several different characteristics, including its role in a corridor. So what are we looking to accomplish here with all of this? In the short term and in the long term, ecological sustainability is what our goal is. That's the highest level. We're setting a goal to gain ecological sustainability. We want our properties and the species to stick around. So there are some obstacles to that with the uncertainty. We're not where we need to be with understanding of Earths and the weather systems and the climate systems. There are limits to the models that are out there. There's bias, and we, even as scientists, make mistakes. So we need to take all of that into consideration, own it, and then adjust accordingly. Then on the bottom there, variables, there's what I call the human factor. So ecological sustainability isn't what you learned in Ecology 101 in college. It's change. That's idealist way of looking at things. It's if everything else was happy, then we can do X, Y, and Z in our objectives and get things accomplished. But the human factor comes into play. And that's a good thing that we recognize it and we can adjust and make sure we take things like the cultural variables, the economic variables, environment and what that means to the community and what that means to the population at large are important considerations to make sure that we define those and we incorporate those into our plans. And most important, and again, we talked a lot about it this morning in the panel, the social concerns. Taking into consideration our neighbors. At Ridge and Valley, what we did as part of our planning process recently is just simply develop a letter that when we acquire a piece of property, we send it out to all the adjoining properties and say hello. Important. And make sure that if anyone has any issues or problems or concerns, that we can address them right away. So how do we get there? Adaptive management. I spent a huge part of my career as an emergency manager for Somerset County. And when you show up in the middle of the night to a big emergency and there's a lot of uncertainty, you need a system to follow. And the system that we followed there, it was fairly easy for me to get back into doing this type of work because the system that we use in restoration projects and land conservation is very similar. And it's structured, it's based on the best available science information. It embraces the variables, it embraces the uncertainty, and it works simply like this: set objectives, identify strategies, identify tactics, and then get down to tasks. You monitor, monitor, monitor. And when something isn't working, there's a problem at one of those steps. It could be that, hey, we wanted to accomplish X, Y, and Z in 6 months, and you're at 6 months and you only got half done. Well, add some resource or change your objective. That's as simple as it is. So what we're going to do is just keep going around and around, and there is no end to this. That's why I'm out of emergency management back in this business, right? Because I at least I sleep doing this type of work. But we keep going, and it's 5 years, 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. We want to continue to plan and make adjustments as necessary. So Ridge and Valley is involved in a number of great projects. We got some great support from TC Energy and First Energy to build a climate corridor across one of our properties, Dark Moon. It's a riparian corridor. It'll be forested when we're all done. We also, as I mentioned, we incorporate this way of thinking into our planning process when we're prioritizing properties. And then we got a great grant from the Open Space Institute and the Land Trust Alliance to allow us to develop what we're going to call sustainability annexes to incorporate into all of our land management plans. We have over 20 land management plans. And what that will do is it will take the uncertainty and put it on paper. And then what we can do through adaptive management is record our actions. And then we now currently will be able to monitor what's going on and make adjustments. But people, hopefully 100 years from now, will have that as a written record to see what we did, what we tried, what worked, what didn't work, and why. That's how we're addressing the uncertainty. Last slide is a map, again, that we had a grant through OSI and LTA, hugely helpful. This is Ridge and Valley. You can see a little bit of differences in color with a net over the Appalachian Landscape Protection Fund focal area. And these are in the Ridge and Valley. All these properties are preserved properties. So when I look at this, I look and I think opportunities. But what we also do is use this as an engine to drive landowner outreach. So we take this map and dig deeper into the parcel level. We identify gaps and critical gaps, and that's where we put our energy for landowner outreach. So that's my time. I think there'll be some time for questions when we're all done. And so thank you for your attention. Thank you for coming in. Tricia, coming back up.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. Yes, we will have questions at the end. So you can ask all three of us that are presenting today any questions you want at the end of all three presentations. So again, I'm Tricia Aspinwall. I work for the Nature Conservancy. And if you're not familiar with the Nature Conservancy, probably a lot of you are, but we are a global organization. We work in 70 countries around the world, and we are committed to making the biggest possible impact on climate and biodiversity. Hopefully by 2030, we're trying to do as much as we can very quickly. Here in New Jersey, there's about 35 of us that work for the New Jersey chapter, and we have preserved over 60,000 acres here in New Jersey over the course of our, I think about 50 years we've been a land trust in New Jersey. And we have our 5 flagship preserves. One is up here in the Highlands, Johnsonburg Swamp Preserve. I'm going to talk about that at the very end of our preserve. I have a really nice surprise I'm going to show you at the very end. So let's jump in. Okay. Beginning of our session, I read a land acknowledgement. We stated, with this understanding, we are committed in New Jersey to working as partners toward a shared future with deep respect and equity. It's just a short portion of our land acknowledgement. That's not just words. We are actively working with that patience and humility to build enduring relationships with our Indigenous partners, finding ways to work together and learn from them. To that end, we just did our first rematriation project this month, I should say. We just celebrated it just about 2 weeks ago now. And we're very excited to continue that wonderful relationship with the Cohanzic people in South Jersey, but also with all of the tribes in New Jersey. But getting to the point, Indigenous teachings tell us to make decisions and consider our actions with a goal towards leaving a sustainable world into the future. So, my goodness, leaving a sustainable world for 7 generations into the future. Don't just think about your children and their children. Think about the next 7 generations. So to that end, we have some really tough decisions to make. Jay Watson highlighted this in a little bit of his talk because we work together on the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint. New Jersey will be the first state to approach functional build out. And what does that mean? That means that all land in New Jersey will either be developed or preserved. So right now, land in New Jersey can be broken up, and there's about 5 million acres with real rough numbers. There's about 5 million acres can be broken up into thirds. About a third of New Jersey is preserved. A third of the state is developed. Another third is what we call available, neither developed nor preserved. So it's that third that we need to focus on. We need to act now to make sure that the most important lands left in New Jersey are preserved. Not everything, but focus on those important lands that provide, in TNC, we focus on climate resilience and habitat connectivity. So we're looking at what are the most important lands that we need to protect now to make sure that we preserve that connected landscape of lands that support a diverse population of plant and animal species. So how do we do that? We're one of the leaders of the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint. And this is a screenshot of the blueprint looking at a portion of the Highlands and the Ridge and Valley region. Blueprint's science-based models help us to visually make landscape scale decisions. They incorporate factors such as water quality, rare species, climate change, resilience, and habitat connectivity. The highest ranked lands are shown in purple and dark blue. Developed lands are masked out, so we aren't looking at land that already has structures. And preserved lands are excluded, so we can easily see what we can do to make connections. So that gets us right to the point, so we can focus exactly on where we need to focus our efforts, because we have limited dollars, right? We have to make the best decisions with those limited dollars. So here you can see how we look at Blueprint to, this is the area of Bobcat Alley, and we're focusing some of our acquisition dollars right here. Some of this was in Doug's slide actually too. Some of these properties right here are where we're working on to make our connections in Bobcat Alley. And here's a little sneak preview. That was Conservation Blueprint, but here's a sneak preview of what we're calling Conservation Blueprint Plus. It was recently in beta testing and will be released to the public later this fall. Blueprint Plus will be a powerful tool for more advanced users with custom filtering, reporting features, and multi-parcel analysis. The main improvement in Conservation Blueprint Plus is that the model ranks parcels, not patches, making this version more useful in planning for preservation. Preservation is always going to occur on a parcel by parcel basis. So here we can see how Blueprint Plus can easily identify parcels to make connections between preserved lands. Blueprint Plus can generate a printable report with a map and all pertinent data for an individual parcel or for many parcels with reports and exporting data into a CSV format. It's great for developing open space, simple planning information so that we can quickly get from ideas to action when we're working to protect the most important lands left for preservation. Oop, there's that one. All right, what is the second reason that we are protecting land and how are we prioritizing it? Habitat connectivity. Fragmentation is a threat to these connected landscapes. Doug told us all about the science behind that. In a home rule state, there's very little coordinated planning for development. Development pressures and the rateable chase often cause situations that create conflict for the most appropriate land use. Housing developments have slowed, but warehouse pressure is intense, and local governments are working hard to balance budgets in this economy. We must work now to identify the most important lands left to preserve in a connected landscape while we have that opportunity. I love this map. So we can look at migration patterns on a continental scale here. The different colors represent mammals, birds, and amphibians. And what do you notice real quick? So right here in our backyard, we have the Appalachians, and look at the flow there. The Appalachians are effectively a superhighway for migration. So if we zoom into the New Jersey Appalachians and what we refer to as our Bobcat Valley project area, you can clearly see how our state plays an important role in species movement on a continental scale. New Jersey is an important pinch point for the longer migrations, and our road network fragmentation threatens even the smallest migration patterns. For example, salamanders crossing roads to fulfill their life cycle needs. Bobcats, our cute and fuzzy mascot, also need very large ranges to fill their needs, but they're also an umbrella species. When we protect bobcat habitat, it also protects the habitat of many other important species, from bears to butterflies. Cute pictures. Sorry. We're also working to influence policy and advance habitat connectivity goals. We do have the ability to create safe road, bridge, culvert crossings for species if transportation organizations are directed to do so. And that's just not happening right now. So we're trying to talk to DOT to hopefully get them to talk to DEP a little bit more. And, you know, by proactively planning with a regional lens, we can best plan for the places that both people and species can thrive without being on top of each other. Finally, our third major why for protecting land is climate resilience. Unfortunately, research is showing that species are not thriving in America. We envision a world where people and nature thrive, but we have, we've reviewed many sobering studies that indicate nature is not thriving. Global biomass of native species is down something like 20%, with mammals, amphibians, and butterflies declining much faster. There's about 3 billion less birds than there were in 1970, a decline in abundance of about 29%. There was another study, this one's really interesting, that found that all habitat types were declining except one. Any guesses? Wetlands. Yes. Nice. Carla's my rigger. Wetland habitats are actually gaining birds. The authors of that study attribute this to two things: better regulation of harvest and billions of dollars spent on restoration, management, and protection of wetlands. Suggestion is we can reverse this trend if we are willing to conserve adequate amounts of high quality habitat. And Doug hinted on some of these in his slides as well. But in addition to preserving connected lands, we must also identify and preserve lands that have the characteristics needed for plant and animal species to adapt in the face of a changing climate. TNC's Dr. Mark Anderson, he works for our Center for Resilient Conservation Science. He predicts through his research that species are moving north and west. His Resilient and Connected Lands Network are those identified to be the most climate resilient lands because the data shows that they have the characteristics to be able to support the adaptations that plant and animal species are likely to need as the climate change. And Doug shared a little bit of this. TNC has found that species are generally moving north, west, and upslope, reacting to changing climate conditions. So if we can adequately conserve a variety of connected microclimates, and Mark Anderson refers to this as preserving nature's stage. So if we have that variety of connected microclimates, we can allow space for species to adapt. And this is the basis of TNC's Resilient and Connected Network data. And you can, there's an excellent mapping tool that you can look at resilientlands.tnc.org. Should have put that on there, but feel free to follow up with me if you want a link to that later. So What are TNC's prioritizations globally? We have 4 global focal places: Amazon, Kenya, Borneo, and our Appalachians. But why the apps? Recall the migration pattern I showed earlier and the resilient connected network I just talked about. The apps rank very highly for all of the most important characteristics of climate resilience, allowing for plant and animal species to adapt and survive as the climate shifts. Apps are high ranking for a lack of fragmentation, forest carbon, and that resilient and connected landscape. This is why TNC is focusing our efforts, not just in New Jersey, but nationwide, globally. This is a focus for us to protect as much land as we can in the Appalachians. Here's how this crucial pinch point works out in our own backyard. The resilient and connected network data helped us to identify 3 focal landscapes to focus our work here in New Jersey. The Kittatinny Ridge, connecting Pennsylvania to the Shawangunk Ridge in New York. The Highlands, which also starts in Pennsylvania and extends through New York and across the Hudson to Connecticut. And of course, our traditional Bobcat Alley, which is the critical connection between the ridge and the Highlands. These focal landscapes guide where we are focusing our efforts to protect the most important climate resilient lands, the lands with the best potential for habitat connectivity. When we closely evaluated all these focal landscapes, we looked at vulnerability and opportunities. In our expanded Highlands focal landscapes, we added project areas, they're highlighted in orange, to focus on protecting a particularly vulnerable landscape to fragmentation. In the Kittatinny Ridge, we are working to increase the buffer to the ridge, protecting more of that unique Ridge and Valley landscape. The Southern Highlands, if you can see there, the green lands are protected, and there's a lack of green in that Southern Highlands when you compare it to the Northern Highlands where all the Newark watershed land is. So we're going to focus on that Southern Highlands to, while it's still vulnerable to that fragmentation. We're working with partners to employ multiple strategies to accomplish protection through this landscape, from land protection grants to outreach partnerships and more. We have some really exciting long-term goals for Bobcat Alley. And this is our traditional Bobcat Alley that we've been working on for about 10 years. And to date, with our partners, we've protected 1,560 acres in our original Bobcat Alley corridor, representing about 25% of our goal, with just about 39% of this region preserved. You can see how over the last decade, TNC and partners have worked to fill in the connectivity gaps in our original Bobcat Alley corridor, though I definitely see a lot more that we can be doing here. So we are now expanding our focus to better align with TNC's global priorities. Oh, thank you. Tripling the size of our original Bobcat Alley. Our new goal is, working with our partners, some of which I'm speaking with here today, is to protect an additional 20,000 acres in this expanded Bobcat Alley, resulting in 50% of this landscape being permanently protected. And this entire area, traditionally what we've talked about is Bobcat Alley, this little thing here. Now we're talking about the whole thing as Bobcat Alley, because it's not just the connection between the ridge. We have to do more work along each of the ridges. We are committed to protecting this corridor of climate resilient land for habitat connectivity for the next 7 generations of not only our families, but all species that call this area home. So with that, that's just about the end, but I want to share a little bit of good news with you. Our plan is working. Bobcats were nearly extinct in New Jersey, but with all of our help, all of us together, all of us partners, protecting corridors that are climate resilient, the bobcats are making a comeback. We knew this already, but we captured a really cool photo just the other day. Our wildlife cameras captured a mom and 2 baby bobcats traveling through our Johnsonburg Swamp Preserve in Freeling, Hudson. So they're really So I will leave you with that and hand it off to Barbara Davis.
Okay, I need to take a breath because I have to tell you how good it feels to be in a room where the first speaker says he's an ecologist and he's using that term properly. I'm Barbara Davis. I'm a licensed planner and I work for the Lake Conservancy of New Jersey. And I've spent the last couple of months listening to workshops from the New Jersey Planning Association because their conference is virtual for a couple of days. And they're taking our words. They're using our words like ecosystem and ecology to talk about housing developments and live place, workplaces. So it's really nice that someone who's trained as an ecologist became a planner so I could do this work to hear those terms. So what I'm here to do today is to build upon what Doug and Tricia talked about. And I want you to leave empowered. I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I'm a really hard worker. And I work for an organization where everybody works really hard to make things happen. So I want you to be able to leave here and know that we can do this. And there are ways to do it, to take the concepts that Doug taught us, the information that Tricia relayed. I have to say, I ride my bike all around here. And I was in Alamucci Township on my bike, and a bobcat ran across the road right in front of us. So that's us. We're great. Okay. So what I do at the Land Conservancy is I head up our planning program. And again, I'm trained as an ecologist and a biologist, and I got my planning license because I wanted to write these open space plans, farmland plans, trail plans, in order to help towns access more funding for land acquisition. And I've been at the Conservancy for almost 25 years. And what I've seen is the evolution of these types of plans. And I'm going to put it in a positive light, but I want you to understand that I'm coming from kind of a little bit of a negative space. So you're here to help me get into that more positive space. I work in a field that is a glass half full, right? I can do this, and we can do it for all the right reasons. Use planning for resiliency. Use it as a tool to get funding. Use that funding to help preserve land. So what I do is I write open space and recreation plans. It's why I asked Tricia to be part of, I want to be part of her workshop, so I can tell you that. And not for nothing, yesterday at work, one of the towns said, we really appreciate the open space plan you wrote, but we're going to do this other one. So I thought, okay, let me look at the other one. And the other one has all of my chapters in it. It goes through all the parks. And then they get to chapter 9. And chapter 9 is their acquisition plan. And the town says we have no plans to acquire any additional land. That's not. So I'm here to tell you what an open space plan is and what we've done with it. I want you to go back to your towns. And if they say we're doing an open space plan, and chapter 9 says we're not getting open space. Okay, so where did we go? I've been doing this for 25 years, right? And 2012 came, Superstorm Sandy, one of my favorite meetings of all time, right? We go into Woodbridge Township, and it's me, the president of the organization, who's great, and 10 men, and the president is me. So it's me, 12 people, 11 men, and me. And, so they're all talking in Woodbridge about how bad it is after Superstorm Sandy. Maybe they had like 8 homes that were damaged. This is the beginning of it. And we start to talk about what the Land Conservancy does and our open space planning and the land acquisition and how you can work with green acres to acquire land and how you can do it faster than going through the FEMA process and how it can capture those properties that FEMA they don't qualify for. So by the end of the meeting, the mayor started talking, and they had more than 8. They had like 700 homes that were impacted by the flooding. So we worked with Woodbridge Township. This was May. I gave them a contract because you do have to get paid for your work. This is not a lot to listen. I gave them a contract the next day, and this is May. And in August, Green Acres had completely pivoted. I don't know how many remember 2012. And they went from land acquisition for open space to land acquisition for flood protection. The Blue Acres program really, ramped up. And we got 250 people to sign on to the Blue Acres program. At meetings we held in the pouring rain, just like, yesterday in New York City, where our tent was flooded, to help owners in Woodbridge apply to the Blue Acres program so the professionals at Blue Acres could help make it happen. And this was highlighted in National Geographic, so it's the photograph of National Geographic, where our work became a model, right? So this is where it all started, was in Pequannock Township. So I started with the Land Conservancy. Pequannock is one of the first towns we have to do. Did a bang up open space plan, and they're not acquiring any land. So clearly, like, something didn't work, right? Well, it's not working. And we're at the open space meeting, we're like 6 months into this, and it turns out that the problem is really flooding. So I'm sure all of you know the geography, and Doug and Tricia did a great job, right? So this is the Barbara Davis view of the geology of New Jersey, okay? So you have Route 287 going down New Jersey. My parents lived up here at the top of Route 287. So it's totally awesome when they put in the highway, I could drive to my folks' house. Okay. So now you think about kind of where that Route 287 and the highway is, right? You got the highlands coming down 287 cut. It's right there. Something back. See my mom, dad. And then you keep going down from Route 287 and it ends in the Piedmont, right? And that's what happened at the corner. There's 287 cut their municipality. So you had the highlands coming down. You've got the highway, which is acting as right, all of that water. And then once the water does get across the highway, boom, right into the Piedmont. So Pequannock and Lincoln Park, like those low areas, really should never have been built. And if you're from those towns, I love those towns. I go there all the time. It's just that really. And so the Pompton River now is getting backed up, right? Because you have the highway infrastructure coming in, and they're building these roads to make it safer and faster for us to get to see our parents. But it's causing all of this flooding background. And people are coming to the open space meeting over and over again. My house is getting flooded. I can't get out of my neighborhood. Emergency management, has to keep coming back to help us, right? And we don't qualify for federal funds. What do we do? So this is an open space program. And not for nothing, it's right along the Pompton River, which had been cut off because of the Great Highway, so nobody could get to the river to even take a walk. So we did a little plan and we identified 66 properties that if they were bought, could create an interconnected set of open space and walking path along the river. So within, and it took a long time, so you gotta be really patient. Within 13 years, we got 66 of the properties and it demolished the houses and created this much safer area. And it, again, it doesn't take rocket science. You got to know your funding. So make sure your towns have adequate planning to allow for funding. Talk to the state staff. They're great people at Green Acres. Ask them questions. I have people calling me all the time. I work for the Land Conservancy. I'm happy to answer their questions, but I'm not a funder. So know your funding source, right? And work with your property owners. So this worked out really well, and this is the Pompton River Trail System. Superstorm City, like I said, this is a photograph from Woodbridge. Oh my God. Okay, and this is Sandy Ergo, who heads up our land preservation program. You can see the red on the houses, these were condemned. This house was one that applied for the Blue Acres program, so we put signs out so the neighbors would know that this property was being protected. They had so what happened in 2012 was you had Superstorm Sandy, you had tremendous flooding. And Governor Christie was the governor at that time. He transferred kind of all the money to the Blue Acres program, transferred it to the shore towns, but nobody at the shore town wanted to be bought out. So then he realized there really was a lot of flooding kind of in stream from there, which is where the Raritan, the South River, all started to qualify. So the advantage, and again, I'm trying to tell you so you guys know kind of the tricks, right? Is that when you have large scale impacts like this, like Doug was saying, some of those small properties are super duper important, right? And it takes just as much work to preserve a quarter acre as it does, or maybe more work, first we know for sure, than the 100 acres, right? But because there's so many of them, you can group them together and save costs. So we would group them together and do appraisals on 20 properties. Do surveys on 20 properties. You get a savings in costs. The other thing was a lot of the people here, this is an overburdened community. So people moved here because it was less expensive to buy those houses. And they're now like, it's not only that it less expensive, it's really hard to rebuild and to, put in the money and go, and English is their first language. It's like a huge issue, right? And, kind of on top of it, and forgive the wording, they're underwater in their mortgages. They owe more than the house that is worth. So, golly, what do you do then? So Sandy, what she did was she started calling the banks and telling them, you have to accept kind of the appraisal pre-flooding, not post-flooding, but pre-flooding. And because we had so many houses in the program, the banks agreed, state agreed, and Woodbridge was able to make a lot of these homeowners whole. The other thing was we got community, what's the right department called? Community development, community support, like within the towns, because people like where they live. They love where they live, right? And they want to raise their children there. They don't want to be bought out and then have to move out of their towns. So if you get all the departments of the town kind of working together, you can make sure people really are home. Not only do they have the right value for homes, but then they can move back in if they want to be. Huge difference. So these are the numbers, totally great numbers. But you can see, right? We purchased at this time 171 buyouts, 25 acres. Right? 734 homes are in the flood hazard area. Look it up on, I think the Scientific American did one of the articles, a great article on it. So this, I wanted to give you an idea of how the process works, but I want to empower you. So you have to plan, right? What is it that you want to buy, especially if you're going to advocate to the town? Where are the most damaged houses? All of this information is publicly available. And I do want to make a plug for Conservation Blueprint. And I was on the steering committee when it first started. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, whatever, it's not a planning tool, sorry. But you know what? It really is good. And the advantage of it is, and I want you to kind of take it from my perspective. A big part of my job is working with graduate students. Down the end of that is working with me now, and she's fabulous. If you have a chance to talk to her, you really have to talk to her. She's graduated at the University of Pennsylvania, super smart, and she's one of my planning fellows this year. That's my favorite part of my job, to get to work with these students, right? And when I'd say, like 5 to 10 years in, when I talk to them, because of course I know everything, right? I said, like, you got to know GIS. You got to know computer methods, right? You don't need to know that anymore because you have conservation blueprint, right? I'm sorry. So, conservation blueprint is a really fantastic tool for understanding in an easy way where property is and why it's important. You can use conservation blueprint. You can go down to the parcel level to see your property. And that is a huge thing. We use it now in all of our planning documents. We use the GIS to make the base map, and then we'll go immediately to conservation blueprint to do all of the visionary maps within the document. I'm very excited for conservation blueprint plus. So plan, identify, and those are kind of big words, right? Priority analysis. We're all very smart here. You know what's important. That's your priority. Negotiate, build relationships. This is also important. I don't know everybody. I'm a super nice person on most days, but I negotiate with Mr. Davis. It's just like could be a bad foot that day. But someone else may know Mr. Davis and be able to negotiate with him. So know who to talk to and encourage and empower people to do that. Apply for funding. Funding is good. There's a lot of money. Use it. If you don't apply, they're going to put the money someplace else. So make sure there's a need. Even if you don't get it that first year, it justifies the money. Implement. Don't be afraid to take a building down. Some buildings are really lousy and unsafe. Take it down. Green Acres will help you pay for that. Sometimes counties will help you pay for that. I live in Morris County, and they changed their county rules to help pay for demolition. Like, woohoo, this is a big deal. Morris County is not always first in line. So what are we doing now? So this is a picture. So, this was on my birthday. And it's supposed to be very sad in 2018. This is up in Totowa, Little Falls area. And, you know, people were stopped on the highway to look at this. So what happened was, this is just terrible. Sorry. Massive flooding, the water's backed up, the car dealers right next to the river, right? And all the cars washed off into the river, brand new cars. Okay. So that is a very effective photograph because, really, like, oh my God. So, Bergen County, and my mom, couldn't forget the 287, my parents are up on the phone, part of 287. My mom, had lunch with her, you know, this was probably 2015. And she says to me, Barbara Jean, she says, there's a question on the ballot to allow the Open Space Trust Fund to be used for flood mitigation. Of course, we had put it on the ballot. I said, really? She said, yes, and Barbara Jean, I just don't think I'm gonna vote for it. You know, clearly she's trying to go to me. What happened with Bergen County is they met with us about our work in the pond, right? And they have towns in Bergen County, and this is true for every town. You have municipalities that qualify for one source of money and municipalities that don't qualify. What happened in Bergen County is a lot of these older towns don't have the land for acquisition, but they have homes severely impacted by flooding. New Milford is a big one in Bergen County that has a lot of that. So these are just some of the stats, right? 5,700 claims have been filed just in Bergen County with FEMA. $212 million has been paid. So they hired the Land Conservancy once this question passed to do flood acquisition plans. There's a lot of towns in Bergen County. There's 83, like a lot of towns. We've only done 12 because it's really hard to talk these towns into doing it. But this represents 41% of all the claims, 39% of all the buyouts. So we're hitting the right towns. And it included New Milford, which is number one. They had 527 claims, $25 million in federal payments. So they've since used the plan to go ahead and apply to the county for funding. Bergen and Morse, I know, have this program. You have to have the plan in order to qualify for the funding. The plans in Bergen County are paid for by the county. They pay our fee, which our fee is low. Morris County does it on their own. So there's ways to do this. So again, I'm trying to just explain that there's kind of the first step is the planning, but it leads to more resilient design. So this is the town in Oakland, where we've done the work. So my cousin just bought a house in Oakland, a super nice house. Ramco River's right there. Like, that's funny. And he said, Barbara, it's all the way down there. So the Ramco River is a serious, challenge in Oakland Borough. And if you think about it, right, and I grew up in Bergen County, these were the vacation destinations, right? You go out to Oakland, to have a cabin in the woods. So this is now 4-season homes. There's a place, just to cycle back to Lincoln Park, where there were restaurants where people would boat up to the restaurants. Now, way full, right? But this is what's getting flooding. And of course, just to circle back to Doug, these floods are happening a lot more often. So these are practical steps that you can do to help. In Oakland, again, it started with a plan. They have a park that is being flooded. The houses around the park, these are old towns, old houses. And we set up this program to buy those houses, all willing seller, no eminent domain, and it's working really well. And it's a very stepwise approach. So you can see that 2014 was kind of the start of it, and we're still working with it now. So you have to be super patient. Again, this is Oakland. This is the analysis. I would do this now if I was going to redo it on Conservation Blueprint to kind of show how it works. So what are the challenges? And we kind of did touch on this, right? Appraisals, the value of the property. Make sure you go on the Green Acres website and look up Green Acres certified appraisers. If you are unsure about an appraiser, call me, call Tricia, call Doug. We'll give you recommendations. There are people that we use that understand the program, that are charged reasonable fees, and we'll help you through that. Mortgage is valued more than the property's worth. That's just upsetting. But that absolutely happens. amount of time to sell property to the government is just terrible, right? You know, you want to, like, my friend just sold her house like one day and, you know, the house is going to close in like 6 weeks, right? You want to sell your property to the government, you have to be very, very patient. And it can go on for a year. So again, if you kind of know the process, you know, and the town is willing, towns can purchase it up front and then seek reimbursement from New Jersey. You just have to explain it to the town. So, but it does take time. English as a second language, big, huge challenge. And I'm not saying anything that people in this room don't know. Mistrust or fear of working with the government, big, right? Especially if English isn't your first language, especially if you're not a citizen, like these are challenges. That's why it's good to work with a language, right? You know, sure, Land Conservancy on it, you know, sometimes they think we're from the government, you know, so because of the New Jersey part, but we try to explain that we're a nonprofit organization and it sometimes can really ease that first step in. What else should you consider? So this is just so interesting, right? We had Superstorm Sandy in 2012 and everybody was panicked, you know, 12, 13, 14, a lot of work going on. Like 16 down, 17. They're like, yeah, that was a bad flood. Then that 2018 storm was like 1 hour, 1 day, you know, and you had 20 cars floating down, you know, the river in Totowa. You know, people started to wake up again. Yesterday in New York City, you know, I had people texting me from all over. How are you doing? We're fine, but you know, New York's a problem. So I think that complacency may start to shift after the summer we had, but it's a real thing. Helping people who rent, big, huge problem, and I don't have an answer for that. Federal funding is for the owner, right? If you rent, you don't qualify for that. And that's like a whole different department, but it's a big issue. Like a good way to think about that are in Woodbridge, we had a big problem with, what is it called when you have campsites and their trailers and their houses, mobile home sites, sorry. You tend to, you know, have your mobile home, but you don't own the site where you have your home. That's a big challenge. Oh, that was the next one. Sorry. Okay. Relocating their families in the same town. And also, Tricia talked about this really well. So did Doug. Checkerboarding, right? So you have these are tiny little properties and you purchase 20, yes, and you have 3 left. That's a challenge. Okay. So this is another case study. We recently did someone from Knowlton. I read about it. Knowlton's great. Am I done? Okay, how am I doing? Okay, let's go back.
I got so into your presentation, I forgot to give you 5 minutes.
Sorry, I'm really sorry. Okay, Knowlton, we just did their open space plan and we got funding through the same source that Doug got for the Open Space Institute. So we did it for free for Knowlton. Because they have flooding issues. So we could, you know, document the flooding issues, document where they should prioritize their land, use conservation blueprint. Knowlton will carry this forward. Sparta, Glen Park, Sparta. I want to have this slide out there. It's not only acquisition, and I think Doug touched on this too, it's restoration and proper management of the land. This is in Sussex County, the Walkill River Watershed Management Group. If you see Christine Rogers here and Nathaniel Saida, they do great work with Trout Unlimited. They work with TNC. Excellent group, super good to work with. They access funding, we don't. I wouldn't even know how to do their applications. Oh, this is my last slide. Factors of your local government, make sure you work with your government. The community, I'm just finding that the local government is saying, we don't need that. And yet, you know, there's not enough people who are telling them, yeah, we do. You don't have to go to a meeting, just email them, bombard them. Constant communication. Clearly I talk a lot. Keep in touch. Clarify your goals early. If you can really tell people what you want and stay focused on that, it helps your messaging. And then collaborate. The more you can work together, we work a lot with RBC and TNC, great partners. NWA is here, I see them, love NWA. Know your partners, know how you can work with them. With that, and now I'll open it over, sorry. Thank you very much. So Tricia, Doug, and I are here to answer questions and
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a fabulous presentation. I think Both of the presentations were very, very good, and open it up for questions. Anybody, Amy?
Yeah. I'm chair of the Space Committee of the Environment. And so I have that down, we have moved city plan and the money for acquisition. Flooding is becoming a bigger issue in our town. Should we have a separate flood mitigation plan? Is that something we should proactively be doing? What do you think?
So I'll jump into that really quick. So where you need to start is actually through my former life, and that's through the emergency manager.
Okay.
So you have a local emergency manager, a municipal emergency manager, who communicates and plans and all those phases of emergency management with the county. You have a great county emergency management coordinator. The county has a mitigation plan. The question that you would ask is there a flood component to our county mitigation plan? How does that affect me in Marion Township?
Okay.
And once you get the answer, you may be happy, or you may say,
Exactly right. So here's the so that's the real answer.
that's the point.
That's the good answer. So here's the Barbara kind of list on that. Is that Hunterdon County redid their open we're kind of in jump here, right? Okay. Hunterdon County just redid their open space plan. They did not include flooding in their open space plan. Hunterdon County should consider flooding in their open space programs. And we're really in a coma. Hunterdon County, you know, if you're having a problem, Meriden is an important community. Hunterdon. We give the most money to the county. Important. That I think look at your OEM and then contact the Hunterdon County Planning Department. Great department. Kate Fullerton is a supervising planner there. And tell them the challenge you're having. And tell them you went to a workshop where they talked about programs in Morris and Bourbon County. And can you have a conversation about that? And then you can talk about flood planning and all of that. But yeah, definitely do what Doug suggested and definitely look at your open space program.
And I'll for everyone, whatever mayor or wherever you're at as far as the category of work. When I was in Somerset County, what we did is we moved the mitigation plan out of engineering division once all the projects were done, and we moved that plan and ownership plan.
Okay.
So planning owns open space and planning owns mitigation. So they work very, very well together. So for everyone, your counties, if they're not looking at it that way, they should, because now comes the future. Right? We took care of most of the problems that we could with money available and resource available, and now we're planning for the future through those two times.
I think we have time for at least one more question before we break for lunch.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm a New Jersey native now living in Pennsylvania and involved with wildlife corridor advocacy in Pennsylvania and on the same board at the Hunterdon don't work at, but I'm a board member at Hunterdon Land Trust with me. I have a question about regional connectivity, and I've looked at a lot of maps. I know what's going on in Pennsylvania. Western Pennsylvania Conservancy did some great mapping, not as complete as what's been done in New Jersey for lack of funding through our Department of Natural Resources. However, what I noticed with all of these maps, as we've had conversations with throughout the region, in New England and throughout the Mid-Atlantic, mapping stops next to borders, and as you show, and I've seen that migration down so many times. I've loved looking at it. It's beautiful. It's inspirational, but it's a regional issue. And Nature Conservancy is a regional organization, and a lot of their projects though stop at borders. And I'm wondering, is there any way where we can somehow get these maps to work on more of a regional level? I mean, it even seems like New Jersey Change and Conservation Blueprint, I think, are on two separate platforms. Do they work together?
They do, because we host change on Conservation Blueprint, and in addition to hosting it, we also use their data in our ranking. Okay, so things that are highly ranking for change are going to rank very highly on conservation.
Okay, so there's a blending there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of the mapping projects do stop at borders, and it frustrates me to know as well, because nature does not stop at borders, obviously. But it's the nature of the funding, unfortunately. So conservation blueprint, yes, focused in New Jersey, change is going to be focused in New Jersey. But Nature Conservancy being a global organization with strong regional connections, I talk to my colleagues in Pennsylvania all the time. I talk to my colleagues in New York all the time. We work together. I sit on a Northern Appalachians partnership where we're trying to work together to affect land change on that larger landscape scale. We also, I sit on a couple committees for the Highlands, because the Highlands is not just in New Jersey. It actually stretches from Pennsylvania all the way up to Connecticut.
Yeah.
So what we've been advocating for as the Highlands Conservation Act, the federal one, was reauthorized recently. We're talking about where we can do more land protection in the Highlands. We're advocating strongly for the Forest Service to use the Resilient and Connected Network, because that is a nationwide data set. It's the same data goes into that kind of ranking, so it's consistent across that entire region. So, long story short, I would recommend that would be a good data set that could be used across the state of Pennsylvania. That answer your question?
Kind of. Are you working with the CLI, the Conservation Landscape along the Resiliency Bridge? Is that because that is the big connector?
Yeah, we talk to them as much as we can. Yeah, they're doing some really great work. What is it, Audron, Janine, or she's fabulous.
Yeah, she's great.
They're doing really great work.
So what was that? That was the federal legislation about?
The Highlands Conservation Act. Unfortunately, the Ridge is not technically in the Highlands, so there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But they're still doing really good work through the Pennsylvania chapter of the Nature, which is actually the Pennsylvania Delaware chapter of the Nature Conservancy, and Audubon.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of difficulty with the Pennsylvania Nature Conservancy, but neither here nor there.
If you have a message from Audubon, try to help.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add to that? 'Cause I know you work with the Pennsylvania Land Trust.
Yes, so maybe work. To the mapping point, yeah, they use a lot of the Delaware watershed mapping that's available. What was that? Delaware River watershed. There is some watershed scale that, crosses the border, and some of that is pretty sophisticated in what kind of data that they represent. TNC's got, lots of good stuff. There's also, let's just be one.
But the Pennsylvania Land Trust, I think what's unique there that I want New Jersey to do more of is that they all work together. They have that.
It was
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
And I think they coordinate better. Maybe.
On mapping stuff, they do have some mapping.
Western Pennsylvania Conservancy is actually the best for the DCNR pays contracts with them to do that. And they've done some absolutely fantastic GIS work. They just need more funding.
So I think you bring up a good point. Remember when I talked about kind of the mapping and what you do, and the GIS mapping, geographic information systems, is housed, by county and by state, and very difficult to get out of state GIS mapping, which is the basis for all the maps. So I think on a nonprofit level, we're totally agree, working on it, but we need to get the states to become much more engaged in that process in terms of the state offices of GIS. So, any other questions?
Will conservation blueprint plus have the same wide availability to anyone to use, just like conservation
Absolutely.
blueprint. That's
Yes,
because
and
that's one of the awesome things about the blueprint is that it's open.
current conservation blueprint is not going away. It's meant to be a companion tool for the time being. Once we, have gotten it out of beta and perfected Blueprint Plus, we may migrate all the models over to there because it does have those wonderful advanced features when you can generate a report with a mass, which is something that was really lacking in the original Blueprint. So maybe someday, but it will always, always, always and forever be open to the public, and we would love input on any of your thoughts. And Blueprint Plus will be officially released to the public in December, shortly after the reconvening of the steering committee that I hope Barbara will rejoin.
Great, thank you.
One more question?
I was interested in what you said about working with the indigenous communities. So if you did a repatriation, is that under NACPA? And Native American Vegetation Repatriation?
Oh,
Were you just working with state recognized tribes?
yeah, I'm not familiar with the acronym you said, but the renatriation, and we refer to it that way because they are matriarchal societies, but as far as I know, I've been told. Yeah, so we use renatriation, but we're working with state recognized tribes because unfortunately, due to the nature of colonialism in this country, there aren't any federally recognized tribes here. They've all moved or they've been lost, unfortunately. So we just have officially there's 3 state recognized tribes that are officially recognized, and we've worked closely with 2 of them so far. And we're just hoping to continue that relationship. We were fortunate enough to work with New Jersey Conservation Foundation. We love working with our partner land trusts. Like the more we can all work together, the more we can accomplish. And that's what I always say. But we partnered with NJCF to buy 63 acres of land to give to the comprehensive peoples. And the cool thing about it is that they can trace their ancestors to that exact neighborhood, not the exact property, but to that neighborhood. So they're literally getting lands back that their ancestors won.
What was the other tribe?
The Ramapo in North Jersey. So that's good. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.